Good morning. It's been an exciting infrastructure week here in the United States, and ITS America is very pleased to have been able to host two events. And we're super excited that you're able to join us today for this pre-recorded conversation with our friends spanning the globe in Brussels, Tokyo, and Sydney. And so we hope you are going to enjoy this conversation, and we look forward to continuing the important debate about investing in infrastructure and how technology is transforming the way that we experience transportation.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're connecting from. I'm Susan Harris, and I'm the Chief Executive at ITS Australia. Thank you all for joining me for this conversation on global infrastructure during what's Infrastructure Week in the United States. So this year, I understand that Infrastructure Week in the US is a particularly big deal. We've got the new Biden administration, and they're focused on a large funding bill that's looking to modernise the infrastructure and also increase global competitiveness. Meanwhile, from an Australian perspective, we've got big news here, and that we've got unprecedented spend on infrastructure. The Australian government's committed on delivering nation-defining infrastructure, they're calling it, and we've got looking at an infrastructure-led economic recovery from the COVID pandemic. So around the globe, I'm hearing stories of infrastructure being a really big deal. And so for our conversation today, we're going to particularly focus on the role of technology and how technology is being deployed to win the race for infrastructure in the 21st century. So I'm pleased to be joined by our three CEOs of the three ITS regions, providing their perspectives. So welcome to Amano-san, the Secretary General of ITS Asia Pacific. Welcome to Jakob Bangsgaard, CEO of Erdico. And of course, welcome to Shailen Bhatt, CEO of ITS America. So to kick things off, I think we'll start by exploring some transformational technology deployments that are changing the way people think about transportation. So Shailen, I was wondering if you can kick off and provide some insights from what you're seeing in the US.
Yeah, well, thank you, Susan, and thanks for doing this. It's always great to connect virtually, although I am looking forward to being able to see all of you in person, hopefully in Hamburg later this year and then in LA next year. So, it's Infrastructure Week is a very important time in America that's become a bit of a joke, right? Because for the last many years, everybody has spoken about Infrastructure Week in the United States and said it's incredibly important and somebody should do something, and nothing's ever happened. And and as infrastructure leaders from across the world, we know how important investment in infrastructure is. Well, this year, I think something's going to happen because we have a president, the Biden-Harris administration is incredibly focused on their Build Back Better plan. And under the Build Back Better plan, investing in infrastructure is a cornerstone of that. And then we've got a Secretary of Transportation at USDOT, Secretary Pete Buttigieg, who, when he was a candidate for the presidency, and he actually did pretty well. He won a couple of states. He talked about not just about infrastructure, but the need for technology and infrastructure and utilizing 21st century technology. And I think that's the part that we're most excited about here, because I think I was a Obama Biden appointee about 10 years ago at USDOT when we did what was called then the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, or the stimulus. And one of the criticisms, I think, of that program was that because everybody was like, well, we have $50 billion that we need to spend on sort of traditional infrastructure, and we need to get these projects done quickly. So what ended up happening was a lot of those projects were just, resurfacing projects. Let's go out, let's pave some roads, let's make things look good. But it wasn't really transformational. Now the numbers that we're talking about, instead of $50 billion and $8 billion for high-speed rail back in 2009, they're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars here in the United States. So, that gives you a sense of the transformational amount of investment. And then at the same time, let's not just go out and pave roads, but let's build projects that, they talk about this as a generational opportunity. And if you think about it, anytime you're going to spend that kind of money, you're really transforming for the next decades, because these projects last so long. You're transforming for decades. And what we want to make sure is that, it's not just, the physical infrastructure is important, but there's a digital layer that now overlays it, right? So it's, how do you operate the system more effectively? Well, we know with AI and machine learning and big data, it's not just about how do you get more cars and trucks going, but it's how do you operate the system more effectively, because we know where people are going, we know what their destinations are, we know where the origin of their trips are. Operating the system, becomes much more of a focus, and you can do that now. A big advent of ITS were transportation management centers back in the 80s and 90s. Now you apply all this computational power, and it gets that much more exciting. And then another thing that everybody's talking about now is electrification. The climate change is a huge focus of the Build Back Better plan. I think that's something we're going to see a lot more of, and rightfully so. I think the U.S. has abdicated some leadership in this space for a few years, and it's important that we are leaders again in this space. And then if you think about some of the projects that we have that are out there, I think that another key focus of this is the impact on people, right? So, one of the projects that people have been talking a lot about is in Las Vegas, is, how do you deploy work zone sensors so that, we can predict where crashes are going to be, right? So predictive analytics around crashes and pre-positioning crash equipment. Work zones is a huge issue, right? Anytime you change the state of play, for a road, drivers get all confused, crashes go up. So how do we deploy technology, from that perspective? Cybersecurity, we actually just had a big pipeline get shut down through a ransomware attack. It's going to increase the price of gas here in the United States. And so safeguarding, the infrastructure is incredibly important. So it's a really exciting time here. But what we want to make sure is that when we're going to spend all of this money, we're deploying technology at the same time. So we're maximizing that investment.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I think the size of the investment's amazing that we're seeing across the globe, but really the challenge is to make it smart. We want smart infrastructure, and infrastructure that, as you said, it's generational change. It takes a long time to deploy it, and then it's also here for a long time as well. So having the smarts to make sure that it's future-proof, I think, is really the challenge that our industry's got to make sure that we do that great deployment. So Amano-san, in the Asia Pacific, how are you seeing this play out for Japan and the Asia Pacific region?
Yes, I have very, very similar view on the situation we are now in with Shailen. And as the Biden administration announced very large public investment, the government in many countries is planning similar measures to stimulate economic activities and create job opportunities for primarily recovery from COVID-19. And it looks like something like the New Deal by the President Roosevelt after the Great Depression in 1930. But we are living in a world with dramatic changes of technologies, which deeply affect business and society. So, depending on how we handle it, a structure of global dominance could change in industries and rule making. So, strategic investment in technologies and platforms for the future is very important, in addition to the conventional public works with steel and concrete. So the definition of infrastructure is expanding from very traditional hardware to digital infrastructure, as Shailen mentioned, and also invisible framework embedded in our society. We are a mixed sense of expectations and concerns in new technologies, such as ever-expanding cyberspace, machines with intelligence, exceeding human abilities in some specific functions and drastically changing energy sources. So public funding should work as an enzyme, removing uncertainty and motivating private sectors to actively engage in the emerging areas. Technologies and policies, for example, in energy sources, it has a variety of uncertainties causing reluctance for the industries. Public funding showing the direction and clearing up the uncertainty will be a big thrust to those players. It's not limited to research and development, but includes early deployment. So effective utilization of those technologies require public acceptance, creating operating field and learning from the general public behaviors is part of the infrastructure for the future. Japanese government will release strategic fiscal policy in June every year. So it's not available yet for this year. But the Japanese government has already compiled several important strategic plans in science and technologies, digital government, and green growth strategy. They have common goals to create a vigorous society with enhanced well-beings and competitive advantages in the global economy. Budgetary priority will be given in those areas. So for all the areas, mobility is an essential part of the story. So that's a situation.
And Amano-san, I just, you said something that really just jumped out at me when you said, machines exceeding human capabilities. And I think that's the key, whether it's autonomous vehicles or intersections that are detecting pedestrians and bicyclists. Our focus is on safety. And I think that we've figured out that there's capabilities here that we need to deploy. So I really appreciated that comment.
Yeah. People are kind of generous for the people to make mistakes, but very stringent view on the machines to make a mistake. So we have to change our view on the machines while maintaining a safety is a very, very basic. But we have to live with those new type of machines.
Yeah, it's a fascinating time, I think, when we're seeing this increased digitization and seeing that, we've got the digital layer of infrastructure as well, and seeing digital technologies viewed as infrastructure. I think the other thing I'm hearing too in many of the conversations I'm having with, or some of the conversations I'm having with industry, is around that uncertainty and the different technology pathways. And while industry are keen to innovate, in some cases it's having government step in, as you said, Amano-san, to help deal with some of the uncertainty can then actually facilitate and encourage further innovation and give confidence and investment. So I think that's a really interesting perspective as well. So Jakob, over in Europe, what are the hot topics over there, and what are some of the deployments that you're seeing that are really making a difference?
First of all, good morning, good afternoon, good evening also from my side to my colleagues around the world. We're facing some of the similar challenges that I hear now from North America and from Asia. We are also working with many of the same partners to find the solutions for our challenges in the mobility sector for the future. In Urgico, we created 4 years ago now, we created our Vision 2030 paper where we looked at what is coming in the mobility sector when we're talking about connected, automated, when we're talking about the digitalization, improving multimodality, electrification, and also the user-centric approach that we already heard as well today. What we did at that time was to create the roadmaps towards 2030. How could we, with our partnership, make a difference and form the future? Of course, we didn't foresee the challenges that we've been in the last year, and that has somehow changed our roadmap. There's also been slightly a more focus on sustainability. We have not the New Deal, but the Green Deal in Europe, and we are more focused on much more focused on electrification, for instance, that we were just a couple of years ago. So I think what we see now is that there's more focus on the users. There's more focus on the urban mobility, and looking at both the physical and the digital infrastructure that can create a new normal that everyone agrees to is needed and is possible now. Now that we're given an opportunity in times of despair, we are also given the opportunity of opening up the mobility sector in a different way and looking at how could we actually do it better in the future. So that is very much focusing on the connectivity side, on using IoT, using AI, using the connectivity services, 5G, CITS, and so on, to improve the connectivity of people and goods, and to optimize the existing infrastructure, the uses of the existing infrastructure, because we are not at the moment so much focusing on how can we build more infrastructure, but how can we use the existing infrastructure in a better way through digitalization. So that is where we have been focusing for the last years, and where some things have even been speeding up in the last year due to the pandemic.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see how the pandemic's nudging things in slightly different directions, and how industry is responding to that and governments are responding to that. I think also there's been a general theme about the increased focus on sustainability, in the US, and seeing Amano-san nod and Jakob. I think it's also interesting to reflect that we find ourselves in incredibly challenging times, and yet we haven't pulled back to straight, economic rationalist perspective. That it's more people focused. I'm hearing from all of you, more focused on sustainability, and then getting better value out of while we're seeing really significant infrastructure deployments, there's also a focus on value for money and getting great results from the infrastructure we've got. So looking ahead, I know we're all very much looking forward to the opportunity to be back together at events and back in the traditional formats again. I know we've got some great world congresses lined up. So Jakob, I'm really looking forward to being in Hamburg, and I'm thinking that we might have some opportunity to see some great technology deployed and to see some of the solutions actually up and running. So what have we got to look forward to in Hamburg in October this year?
We have a lot to look forward to. First of all, to meet again. I think what we have in the ITS community is really a very strong network, and where we share experiences and where we build the innovation together. So this has really been we've really been missing this for the last year, to share experiences and to drive the innovation together. This is something that we are working full speed on delivering in Hamburg, and we are at the moment we have seen an incredible interest from the community. We have more than 900 submissions of papers and sessions, which is a record high for us. We have almost 50 demonstrations lined up, 20 technical visits around Hamburg, and we have also some tours of the port of Hamburg and other innovative mobility demonstrations in Hamburg, showing deployment. We also see a strong interest from the startup community. We will have more than 60 startups present there. So we have a whole parallel program for the startup community. We have global forums on mobility as a service and on logistics, and especially ports. We also have a high-level summit that will be taking place for ministers, mayors, and industry leaders. And then we have a whole range of side events that are going to show. For instance, we as Urgico will present our City Moonshot activity in Hamburg, and we will have a public day as well, where we invite people from the local community to visit ITS at its best. And then we are expecting more than 10,000 participants, all taking into account whatever restrictions might be in October, and how we are going to organize it in a for sure safe way for everyone.
So yeah, very much looking forward to the opportunity. So when we're over, whether it's in Hamburg or whether there are other sort of transformational technology deployments that are taking place in Europe, that are things that Urgico are working on or that you're supporting with are there particular examples that you'd like to bring to our attention?
Of what will happen in Hamburg, or?
Are particular examples of technologies that have been deployed that really have transformed the way we think about transport?
Yeah, I would say one thing that we will see more present in Hamburg is urban air mobility, where we will see the usage of drones, for instance. This is something that we also have been working on for a couple of years, but it has been difficult in the last period to further develop this, and this has from the beginning been a big interest from Hamburg and from the industries there. Automation is definitely something that is going to be demonstrated, especially for private cars, but also for commercial vehicles, and we will see also demonstration of truck platooning, for instance, and for commercial vehicles. So I would say automation, we will see the latest development there, and also for urban air mobility.
Fantastic. Looking forward to the opportunity. So Shailen, we missed out on Los Angeles last year, but we're looking forward to the opportunity in 2022 to be back at an ITS World Congress in America and back in Los Angeles. Have you got some examples of some of the transformational technologies that we should be looking out for, or some of the deployments?
Yeah, it's interesting. As I thought about this conversation, I was thinking how much different our 2022 World Congress will be in LA compared to had we had it in 2020, because in 2 years it's such a different conversation, right? And so we've kind of shifted. At the time in 2020, what we were going to think about is technology and how it's moving traffic a little bit better, or some of the large events. And I think in 2022, given the transformational investment that's going to be made, I think what's going to be really exciting is another big concept that has come up a lot is that of equity. And so Salita Reynolds, who is the ITS America board member, spoke in Singapore. She often talks about how you can get to 10 times as many jobs with a car in LA as you can on transit. And so many people are transit dependent. And so I think what we're going to be able to see is you take a region that's been known for traffic congestion, right? If you think of a poster child for traffic congestion, Los Angeles, and all of their efforts, we're going to see some great innovations around the use of transit and tying it all together. So whether it's, streamlining the payment systems, just access and quality of service that LA Metro is striving hard. They're doing their 28 by 28, which is 28 major transit projects in time for the 2028 Olympics in LA. As big a deal as the World Congress is, LA's got some other small events like the Olympics, they've got the Super Bowl and some other things. And so it's going to be really exciting for us to go and see how they operate that system, which is moving all of these people and all of these goods. Jakob talked about the ports. 60% of the goods that are consumed in the United States come in through the ports of LA and Long Beach. And if you look at some of these trends of, the World Congresses that we've been going to, Copenhagen, obviously a huge shipping center. Singapore pretty much rose up to prominence because of international trade and shipping. And now you have the Port of LA. I know shipping is important in Suzhou as well. And so this is this theme for us, because how do you get those goods out of a port through the major, arteries that are pretty choked in a system? And there's some really exciting concepts that are out there now, whether it's, Hyperloop type, solutions or, Jakob talked about the startup culture that's out there. Well, Southern California and California in general is a hotbed of innovation and activity. And so we've been talking to partners like Lacey, which is an incubator in Los Angeles, which is always trying to start up new technologies. The Mayor Garcetti, incredibly focused on infrastructure and transformation. So I would say that is the theme for us in 2022 that we're really excited about, is you get to see a city that in 1984 launched its first traffic management center to help move traffic better for the Olympics in 1984. And it was, they saw some benefits, but if you look, 40 years later, it's a totally different world. And then the last piece I think that we're going to be very focused on in LA is, again, this concept of equity, right? How do you make these investments? In the 1950s and 60s, when we built the interstate system in the United States, a lot of these roads were built through minority neighborhoods. They went out where they could find cheap land and displaced huge populations. And I think that another key focus on these investments now, and I think LA is very focused on this, is how do you do transportation better? And when you do transportation better, it's not just about how do you move more cars and trucks. It's how do you heal some of these wounds that have been created? How do you put people at the center of this? And whether it's mobility on demand, the sort of new green focus, electrification. There's just going to be a ton, and we're really excited about LA.
Yeah, fantastic. Really looking forward to that. And I think that whole focus on equity is really ringing through across a range of different sectors at the moment. I know Salita's been really inspirational speaker. And Amano-san, you mentioned also around the fact that all these changes are having really deep impacts, not just on businesses, but also deep societal impacts, and how technology brings that to play. And I know at the closing session for the ITS Asia Pacific Forum, we had a great session on accessibility with some disability advocates really talking about their personal experiences, but really helped us to think as technologists, how do we cater for everyone to be able to use transport and to get around seamlessly without having to ask for an extra hand, and that equality and ease of access is I think, showing it's a level of maturity of the industry that we're able to think more broadly about how we move people around. But super looking forward to coming over to Los Angeles and seeing some of the technologies and seeing how the city's transformed. I know I was blown away a couple of years ago when I had the chance to have a look at the port and just the extent of the hinterland of the port and the amount of people employed in that activity. So that's quite monumental. Amano-san, so in 2023, we'll be over in Suzhou and back in Asia Pacific for a World Congress. I know there's a lot happening in China, and Suzhou are going to put on an amazing show. Could you give us a bit of an insight as to some of the things we might be able to expect?
Oh, yes. So I'm sure you are familiar with the names of the cities in China because our Japanese character sets are imported from China. So we share the character sets. So I have many names of the Chinese cities in mind. And the Suzhou ITS World Congress, details are not yet decided. So today I'd like to share with you the background, historic background, what the Suzhou city looked like and looks like today. And it's located near the mouth of the Yangtze River, the third longest river in the world, only after Amazon and Nile, and comprising economic center with Shanghai city. So I believe you know Shanghai. So 1 hour drive from Shanghai to the west. And Suzhou is a very old city, as old as Athens in ancient Greece. And it has been one of the most influential cities, continues to be influential city in China for 2,500 years. And in early 8th century, construction of 2,500 kilometer Grand Canal was completed along the eastern coast of China, connecting Beijing to the north and Hangzhou to the south. And Suzhou is located near the southern end of the canal. So it has been a very strategic hub of the Chinese economy. So it's a history, but today, the key players of research and development and deployment of the most advanced technologies, including startups, are concentrated in Suzhou and its vicinity, surrounding Suzhou and the Shanghai area. A number of large-scale pilot projects are going on. Very large number of 5G communication spots, or a whole city can be turned into automated driving area, and so on. And so Suzhou city is a kind of epicenter of intelligent transport system deployment. So I hope you will see and experience a lot in Suzhou in 2023.
Yeah, actually, oh, sorry, Amano-san, I was going to say, after I left Singapore for the World Congress, I went to Suzhou and spent a few days there. And my hotel actually overlooked the Grand Canal. And it was just amazing to think that because it's still a very busy waterway. And it was just driven home to me how important infrastructure investment is, because 2,500 years ago, they built this, canal, and it's still in use today, and has been critical for the economy in that region, which has obviously exploded over the last few years. But there's very old technology and infrastructure, and then there's all the new stuff that they were building. So it's very exciting to see.
Yeah, I think really looking forward to it. I've been to Shanghai, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to extend that trip into China and see Suzhou. But I think also I think those comments too, Shailen, looking at we've got infrastructure that was deployed, hundreds of years ago and still in use today. Interesting to reflect on deployments that are taking place, in our modern times, and having that vision to think about this infrastructure, it's still being used in years and years to come, and making sure that we're wise in our selection and our approach to those deployments. Thank you. So Jakob, your views on, where we're at in terms of, that blend of technology into infrastructure, and whether we've got the balance right, and how you see things panning out from a European perspective?
Well, I think we have loads of opportunities to make our mobility sector smarter, cleaner. That's for sure, and that is what we are working with the stakeholders on. It does put more. It gives us more challenges when it comes to cooperation, because we need to share data. We need to work with the same consumers of mobility, and therefore what we also see is that the importance of bringing an ecosystem together and to cooperate across sectors is becoming more and more important. So breaking down the silos of the traditional way we develop mobility, and then looking at a totally new way with new players, with new services, new technologies coming, and how we need to cooperate across sectors, and even with sectors that we didn't expect to work with just a few years ago. So that is the big challenge. That is what we are trying to do, to bring together an ecosystem and to develop, test, and deploy the technologies in the infrastructure.
Yeah, I think that certainly things aren't getting any simpler. You know, we're getting more players and deeper layers of technology, and you know, that collaboration in the ITS space has never been more important. Amano-san, what are you seeing as the priorities as we, you know, looking for some, you know, as we move forward?
Yeah, as Jakob mentioned, and the new challenges or opportunities we are facing now are very much cross-sector issues. So, for example, electrification of vehicles. Auto manufacturers alone don't solve the problem, because how we generate electric power is the issue. It's outside automobile industries. And so similarly, whatever the challenges or opportunities we have to, I mean, ITS community, I think is tasked to reaching out to wider our partners. And 30 years ago, when we started ITS, academia, government, industry collaboration, it's one aspect. And another is mechanical engineering, electronical engineering, information, and civil engineering, all different areas of researches have to get together. Any single academic society didn't cover all. So ITS community has been the place where all the different people get together and work together. So that's very important aspect. How we take this kind of opportunities and challenges to create brighter future, including infrastructure and the societal framework. So we are.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amano-san. I think it's, you know, that again, that theme of that broader perspective that we need to bring. And Shailen, for yourself, what are you seeing that the end game of, you know, where we're heading to in terms of this balance of infrastructure deployment and the technology that we need to blend in with that?
Yeah, you know, it's so fascinating because I'm a student of history, and so for Mother's Day, we actually took the family to a national park for a hike, and there isn't a lot of technology in our national parks. So we were walking along, and my 7-year-old daughter saw something that she's never seen, which is a telephone sitting. It was a public telephone just sitting there, and it's got a cord. And she's like, what is this thing? And I was trying to explain to her that before everybody had a cell phone, you know, you had to call, and you'd have to call somebody at their house if you had to meet at an appropriate appointed time. And she just could not fathom how that's how we used to communicate. Right. And so as I think about technology and transportation, and that's what in a span of 20 or 30 years, right, we've gone from, you know, land-based phones to cellular everything, and now our lives revolve around cellular technology. And I really feel like with the transformational investment that we're making now, in 10 years, in 15 years, we're going to be, you know, getting together maybe as alumni at one of these world congresses in, you know, and just laughing about how what we thought was so groundbreaking and technologically innovative in 2022 and 2021 is so, has just been eclipsed. And, you know, at ITS America, we talk about a better world transformed by intelligent mobility, one that is safer, greener, and smarter. And when I think about the outcomes we're achieving in transportation right now in the United States last year, over 40,000 deaths on American roadways and close to 1 million worldwide, 29% of American greenhouse gas emissions coming from our sector. And pre-COVID, and traffic is building back again, Americans sitting for 100 hours a year in traffic. I think that technology is critical to finally reducing that number from 40,000 all the way down towards zero, finally reducing those emissions, and finally transforming all of this time that we've lost sitting in traffic over the years, and turning that into productive time and giving that back to people. And if we can deploy technology in an intelligent fashion, as we're doing across the globe and through all of these efforts, I think we're going to be able to hit these targets and finally be transformational. And so that, our kids and our grandkids are like, wow, they kind of weren't doing things really intelligently at the beginning of the century, but now we've got it figured out. And I'm really glad that technology helped pave that role. So it's a really exciting time, and I'm just glad to be part of this industry.
Yeah, thanks very much, Shailen. I think you captured it there, that it is a really exciting time. There's lots happening all around us, and really exciting transformations. We've heard about the trend and the reinforcement of mobility generally. So we've stepped out of our cars, and while people still travel in cars, we're looking beyond that as a more integrated way of moving around. But really exciting to see the ways we're looking, really across the regions here for technology that's making things more sustainable, making things safer and more equitable for people. So there are, I think, themes that I'm seeing across the regions as, we really face an unprecedented time of infrastructure spend globally, I think. So it's an exciting time ahead for sure for the ITS industry. So I'd really like to thank you all for your time this afternoon. I certainly look forward to the opportunity to be back in person with you all. But in the meantime, I think we're hearing that there's still a lot of commonality between what's happening around the globe, and certainly a lot of excitement and a lot of happening in the industry as well. So thank you very much for joining us for the session.
Thank you.
Thank you.